What is your favorite bourbon? That's a question I get asked all the time from my friends and my family, and it's a lot more difficult to answer than you would think because there are so many different bourbons out there and there's so many different varieties. So in this video, we're gonna break down 8 different bourbons that I will always have in the Spinner Speakeasy, and I usually have a backup for. Welcome in, everybody. I'm Brandon Spinner. I'm part of the Barrels and Barrels crew, and in this video, we're going to go through several bottles that range from cheap to pretty pricey, but not necessarily break the bank kind of style. This list is not necessarily a ranking or any particular order, but I want to start with the first one, and this is the bottle that got it started for me. That's Eagle Rare. It's a 10-year bourbon from Buffalo Trace Distillery. It's become a little harder to find nowadays. The MSRP on this should be right around $30 to $35. It's starting to get a little bit higher up there. I just bought one the other day for 36 bucks, but still, even that, it's a very, very good value for a 10-year-old whiskey. Lately, you're starting to see these prices go about $10 for every year that the bourbon is aged. So a lot of people are starting to buy this on the secondary market for $90 to $100. I wouldn't go quite that high. I'd say if you can find this for under 50 bucks, it's great. This is mash bill number 1 from Buffalo Trace Distillery. This is the same mash bill as the namesake from Buffalo Trace Bourbon, also E.H. Taylor, and the 2 Stag brands, Stag Jr., or what used to be Stag Jr., and George T. Stagg. This, again, as I mentioned, was the bourbon that got me into it. And what's the bourbon that is your gateway? What was the one that got you interested or into the bourbon journey? Toss that in the comments below. So next up on the list, probably one of my favorites of all time, and that's Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. Now, this is a little bit higher proof for those of you who are just getting into the game. I show 2 different bottles here because there's multiple different batches out there. These are just the C batch from 2022 and the C batch from 2023. Elijah Craig comes from Heaven Hill Distillery, one of the biggest distilleries out there. This is a mash bill of about 78, 10, 12. So that's 78% corn, 10% rye, and 12% malted barley. Now, these coming in anywhere from 11 years to 13 years with the most recent release. And that one is C923, and we actually just did a bourbon review on that if you want to check that out right here on the top right of your screen. But barrel proof, this comes in most likely from 121 proof all the way up to, I think I've seen 134. Very good, and it's not going to break the bank, especially for a 12-year bourbon or even higher, where you're talking some of these distilleries are putting prices out there of 100 or plus. You should be able to find these for $69.99. That's the MSRP, but I would say go up to $80, even $85 is a great buy for this. A lot of dark oak, some cherries, some dark fruits out of this. Very delicious, and if you're not a huge fan of proof, you can always add a few drops of water. I know that's going to upset a lot of those whiskey snobs and those bourbon enthusiasts, but drink it the way you want. This is a great pour, especially for the price. Next on the list, we're going to go with another bottle from Buffalo Trace Distillery. I know there's a lot of Buffalo Trace Distillery haters out there, and I can understand that because a lot of their whiskey has become allocated, but that's because there's a big demand for it. I think the best of the Weller line is this Antique 107. Weller Antique 107, you probably heard this as OWA or Red Weller. This is 107 proof, again, coming from Buffalo Trace Distillery, but this is their wheated mash bill. And you've heard of most likely Weller Special Reserve, Full Proof, Weller 12-year, CYPB, and Single Barrel. Of the bunch, out of those 6, I would say the most consistent and the best of those 6 is probably Weller 107. This used to be around 7 years for an age statement. There's no age statement on it now. Most people say that it's 6 to 8 years old. It's a very good value if you can find it at MSRP. And MSRP should be around $49.99. Now, a lot of different stores and a lot of different secondary markets have this listed at 100 or higher. What's it like by you? I can find this in Ohio, but that's even been a little harder to find as of late. I always have a backup, and I always buy a bottle of this when I find one because it's really hard to find. So that's what makes this list a little difficult, is because some of these whiskeys aren't necessarily the easiest bourbons to find, but if you find them, I think that this is definitely one you want to grab. It's one of my favorite go-tos, especially on Weller Wednesday. Okay, as we move on to the next one, Russell's Reserve 10-year. This is another 10-year-old bourbon, and it's another 90 proof whiskey. This is coming from Wild Turkey Distillery, Russell's Reserve 10-year. Now, a lot of people might be saying, why didn't you go with a single barrel or even Wild Turkey Rare Breed? I think they're all good, honestly. But when it comes to the price, I mean, the Russell's 10 used to be like $28, $29. Now it's up towards about $35. But really, that's not even a bad deal for a 10-year-old bourbon. As I mentioned with Eagle Rare, that's a lot of age. And this is basically just a proof down but older version of Wild Turkey 101. 90 proof, I think that this is a great substitute for a lot of different of those allocated bourbons that you're trying to hunt. Now, I have seen this around where a lot of people are saying limit one. They have changed the recipe, I believe, but this used to be at least 75, 13, 12. A lot of cherry, a lot of oak, leather, and vanilla out of this one. This is basically what you want out of all of your bourbons. This is a standard classic bourbon with a little bit of that Wild Turkey funk. If you can find this anywhere through $35 or less, I would say go grab one. So the next bottle on the list, we're going to go a little thrifty, and that is JTS Brown Bottled in Bond. This comes from Heaven Hill Distillery. Why thrifty? It's a screw top, and it's not the best looking bottle, right? It's got an older look to it. Maybe something that you would pass up if you saw it on the bottom shelf, which is where it usually is. But this comes from Heaven Hill Distillery. It's a bottle and bond, so that means it's at least 4 years old. It comes in at 100 proof, and it's perfect, in my mind, for making cocktails or just a general sipper. This is the same mash bill as the Heaven Hill 17-year, so that's 78, 10, and 12. I'm a sucker for bottle and bonds, and this is one of the best values you're going to find out there. The only issue is it's not available everywhere. So I know it's available in Kentucky, Indiana. I've seen it in Illinois. I don't believe it's available in Ohio. Can you find this in stores? And if so, what's it priced at? You're going to find two most likely if you see them. There's just the regular JTS Brown, which is the 80 proof. And I would stay away from that even though it's under 10 bucks. But this one right here for $15.99, even as high as $17.99 in some spots, best bang for your buck for a cheap bourbon. So if you had 20 bucks to walk into a store, I'd say this or Evan Williams Bottle and Bond are two great go-tos. And this is again coming from Heaven Hill Distillery, which is pretty known for their bottle and bond whiskeys. So if you ever see this and you've got $20 to spare, why not grab one? So go check that out and let me know in the comments if you've ever seen this and if you've tried it, what you think. So next up on the list, we're going to go a little different route, and this is the only bottle that is a blend of multiple different whiskeys that I have, at least in this list, and that is Barrell Vantage. This is one of my favorite pours from 2022. This was just batch 1, so this comes in at 114.44 proof, so it's a little higher up there. It's about 80 bucks, so that's not going to break the bank, and I really love what Barrel Craft Spirits has been doing. Again, this is Barrell Vantage, but they've got Barrel Batch 34. They've got Rise out. They just did an Amberana finish, which we have a review of right here on the top right. But this Barrell Vantage is a blend of Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee whiskeys that were all finished in different casks. We've got Mizunara, which is a Japanese oak. We've got French oak and American oak, and then they blend this all together. There's no derived real mash bill out of this, but it's really good. 80 bucks on their website. Some stores have it for about 84 to 90. This one is a bottle that I need to go grab a backup for soon. They are on batch 3 now, I believe, but this is batch 1. Really tasty, and if you haven't tried anything from Barrel Craft Spirits, I would give this one a go. So second to last is another higher aged bourbon, and this is Knob Creek 12. I think this is another one of those best bang for your buck for an older whiskey, similar to Elijah Craig 12-year, which was the barrel proof we got. This isn't coming in at barrel proof, this is a 100 proof, but Knob Creek 12, this comes from Claremont, Kentucky, the Knob Creek Distillery, which is Jim Beam, and this comes in at 100 proof. This has a little bit of that classic Beam nuttiness, but also it does have a little bit of everything. We've got that cherry, you've got that oak, even like a Snickers bar type of flavor to this with some caramel and vanilla in there, and that nuttiness. 12-year-old whiskey coming from Knob Creek. It's about a 75, 13, 12 mash bill, so right about even. It's not necessarily a higher rye, but this is really approachable. I think it does drink a little hotter than 100 proof, so if that's not something that you like, you may want to shy away from this, but $60 to $70 for this. Again, a 12-year-old whiskey. I think this blows away Knob Creek 18. So not bad for a price of $60 to $70. I would grab this if I were you. And honestly, I think this is the best of the Knob Creeks. I think Knob Creek 12 is the perfect age for the Knob Creek line. I haven't had the 15 yet. I have had some of the 15-year private selects, which are good, but those are proofed up to 120. But the 18 in a blind, this one won for me. I would grab this day in and day out. I always have a backup to my Knob Creek 12. And last but not least, and as I mentioned in no particular order, we're going with Old Forester Blue Label. This is a single barrel strength. Now, these are very hard to come by in some states. It's a little bit more difficult to find. I do like the Black Label single barrel at 100 proof, but I do think Old Forester really shines at the higher proof. This one comes in at 131.4. These are going to vary, most likely above 130. I have seen a couple near 128. This comes from Old Forester, owned by Brown Forman, which also owns Jack Daniels, as well as the Woodford Reserve. This is a really good bourbon, $80. I don't really think that there's an age statement on it. I'm going to guess that we're probably talking at least 6+ years just for the color out of this. A lot of cherry, a lot of vanilla, and you get a lot of oak out of this. 72, 18, 10 on the mash bill. I would pay up to about $90 to $95 for this. I got this one at Kentucky Bourbon Fest. It's got the sticker on it. But really, $80 in Ohio, that's not a bad deal at all, especially if you're looking for higher proof. Again, this comes in at barrel strength, so that means it's dumped straight from the barrel, and this is a single barrel, so each one's going to vary, but that's what makes these great. And most of these, I don't think I've had one that I've actually disliked that I've drank. And again, not bad for $80. So that'll wrap it up. Those are 8 of my favorite bottles that I'll always have a bottle of on my bar here in the Spinner Speakeasy, and most likely have a backup to at all times. Sometimes I may falter on that. But what are 8 of your favorite bottles that you'll always have on your bar? Put those in the comment section below. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if so, please hit and smash that like button. This is Bailey, the Golden Doodle. She's also a fan of barrel craft spirits. But make sure you hit that like button, and if you enjoyed this video, would love for you to become a barrelhead and hit the subscribe button as well. Thanks for watching. Keep up to date with Barrels and Barrels. You can find more of our YouTube channels as well as more of our social medias, where you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter in the description below. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a